prisoner cannot free himself from his own prison. Sometimes we create our own internal prisons without knowing it. If the things that were holding you back were 100% not true, the moment you recognize that, you just let them go. But the reality is, like, you're getting something out of holding on to them. All the negative things that you do in your life, there's a part of you that is very appreciative of that. It's giving you a sense of security, a sense of safety. It's a really weird concept, but all of a sudden it's kind of this like light that once you see it, it can't be unseen, and it dissipates so much of the resistance we have to like actually letting go of that. So there's an old Talmudic story. It says that a rabbi, a very famous one, got sick, and another rabbi came to visit him, and he asked him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" And the other rabbi looked confused and he said, "I welcome neither the suffering nor its rewards." So the rabbi said to him, "Give me your hand." And he got up. Then a couple of years later, the second rabbi, he fell ill. And another rabbi came to him and answered, "Is your suffering dear to you?" And he remembered what he said. He said, "You know what? I welcome neither the suffering nor its rewards." So I said to him, "Okay, give me your hand." They got up and he was better. So a lot of wise people asked, why did that rabbi wait for another one to restore him to health? He already knew the trick, so to speak. And the answer is that a prisoner cannot free himself from his own prison. Basically, sometimes we create our own internal prisons without knowing it. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can free yourself from whatever possible mental blocks or emotional blocks are holding you back, whether they be big or small. Sound good?
Let's get into it.
Cool. So this is going to be a bit of a weird one. It's going to like, whenever I bring this subject up, it messes with people's heads sometimes. I mean, like, I don't do that. Nobody does that. But we all do. And it's going to be a big part of the book as well. So basically I put it this way. There's a part of you that whatever you say, this belief or this thought pattern is holding me back, you're getting something out of it. It's giving you a sense of security, a sense of safety, whatever it may be, by you keeping yourself small. And whether you want to admit it or not, there's a part of you, all the negative things that you do in your life, there's a part of you that is very appreciative of that. It appeases that part of you. So before we get into it, first off, welcome to the pod, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Any questions to ask about this before we get going?
No, I think I'm candidate number one. So
what do you mean by that? Let's start with that. What do you mean?
It's been something which I'm working on, is trying to get a more accurate understanding of my capabilities rather than defaulting to sort of like lower level sort of emotional sort of constraints as to, I'm not good enough, I couldn't do that, and trying to dig into where does that come from and is it true, has been an interesting process.
Okay, so we're going to go this at a bit of a deeper level today, because I think the common approach is like, okay, I have these, it's called like a limiting belief, something that doesn't help me, whatever it may be. Okay, like where is it coming from? Is it true? Great. That's part one. For some people, that's enough. What's really the mind bender here is that even if it's not true, you're getting something out of this. Like even you telling yourself like, I'm not enough, it's giving you something. And that's really what I want to dig into today, because it's a really weird concept, but all of a sudden it's kind of this like light that once you see it, it can't be unseen, and it dissipates so much of the resistance we have to like actually letting go of that or whatever it may be. Because let's put it this way, if the things that were holding you back were 100% not true, the moment you recognize that, you just let them go. But the reality is, like, you're getting something out of holding on to them. So let me share that kind of a story about a former client. I think this will bring it home. So there was one client and they had everything in place to make a lot more money. They literally 4x the business. Like literally they had everything in place. Somebody who was an expert in the field was like, if you just do this, literally this will solve this one bottleneck and you'll 4x your business, like in the profits as well, not just the top line. And they were resisting doing it. And we broke down what was going on. We got to their beliefs, and they had this belief that if I make a lot of money, I'm greedy, or people won't like me, or whatever it may be. And then we figured out, okay, like what's true, like you said. Said actually, that's not true, because I recognize that if I make a lot of money, I can help a lot of people in my community. I can be a very, philanthropic individual. I can do a lot of positive things. And what was interesting is that solved it for them. They 4X'd the business, so to speak. Everything was going well, but then they dipped. And I had to understand, like, what are they getting out of holding on to this belief? Because that truth was enough to like rattle free for a little bit, but then it came back. And the reality is, a lot of these beliefs that keep us small also keep us safe. At least perceived safety. And that's the thing we have to understand. Like, for them, if they're not going to go really financially big, life is easier. It's simpler. It's what they know. Like, their current community, no one's going to, like, even if it's completely in their head, no one's going to possibly judge them. No one's going to think they got too big or whatever it may be. It makes things simpler. And a lot of the times, we think we have all these negative beliefs about keeping ourselves. It's such a negative thing, but the reality is we actually think it's a positive. We think this will make us feel safe in some way. It'll give us a sense of security, of stability, whatever it may be. And it's like, even the most negative things, for example, like drug addiction, there's a whole saying like that, the addiction isn't the problem, it's actually the cure. Like, you actually really like the addiction. You think it's bad, but you actually really get a lot out of it. It gives you an escape from the emotional issues that you're feeling or whatever it may be. It's making sense so far, because they're kind of cool. Any questions out of it so far?
No, I think addiction's a great example to look at, and I couldn't have framed that any better. That's perfect. It is the cure. When you see it as that, like, the root cause is obviously, trauma. There's some emotional sort of reason as to why it leads to addiction. That addiction as a cure could be replaced. Could be replaced with health and fitness. Could be replaced with mindset work. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, but I think to kind of go back to that topic, like, if you're going to tell yourself addiction is just negative, it's negative for me, I get it, I shouldn't be doing it, I shouldn't do drugs, shouldn't whatever, it's probably not going to work that way. But if you recognize, I'm actually getting something out of it. So what am I getting out of it? I'm getting an escape. Okay, interesting. So it does benefit me. Now, why do I need that escape? Then you can figure out, like how you said, the trauma or whatever it may be. But if somebody were just to say, what, addiction is just negative, it's a limiting thing for me, I'm going to let go of it, it's not the truth. It's actually a positive thing for you in some ways. And that's what I think a lot of us aren't willing to acknowledge. A lot of the stuff that holds us back, the beliefs that hold us back, they also give us something positive. And that creates the prison in our mind, because we don't recognize, I'm actually getting something out of this. I need to be honest with myself. Is this something that I'm getting out of it, something I'm willing to let go of? And in that story about the rabbis, that was the interesting part when I read it the first time, because he's saying, like, do you like your suffering? I don't remember the exact words. Do you enjoy your suffering and the rewards you see from it? Like, what are those rewards? Maybe if you're sick, you get pity. You get somebody to take care of you all of a sudden. People say nice things to you. Whatever it may be. And if you recognize, I'm actually getting something out of this, that, oh shit, I wanted this thing. And that's why I'm keeping myself stuck. That's a real mind bender for a lot of people.
Do you see this playing out specifically, say, in business? I'm not capable of doing fill in the blank. Or do you see it more as an overall comprehensive assessment of our character, like I'm a bad person or I'm a failure, or is it more so like domain specific, like business, relationship, health, or is it sort of more of a comprehensive summary of our identity?
I think our identity leaks into business. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's like, we're human beings in the house, we're human beings in business. Like, sometimes we are able to adjust ourselves a little bit, but it still comes out in various ways. The biggest, again, the place that I experience with, because and this could be all contextual because I work with people that are like in a very strong growth trajectory when they're trying to evolve into the next phase or the next level of themselves or whatever it may be. And there's usually something that keeps them stuck at the old level that they know keeps them stuck. So they're like, this is just a bad thing. I need to just get over this. But because they don't recognize there's also something that's very good for you inside of this, they can't let that go because they're like, without recognizing, it's all subconscious. They don't recognize, there's something really good here that I don't want to let go of. And until they actually bring that to light, they're like, okay, interesting. First off, do I really want that? If not, can I get it somewhere else? I got to figure out a way to overcome this thing. Does that answer your question?
It does. Using the term limiting beliefs, one of the many things which you've taught me is a better definition of that. And so I almost never use the words limiting beliefs anymore. You get me a better lexicon, which is false or true. Because I feel that if I have to take a first principles approach to understanding this, and it's false, then limiting was just this kind of convenient sort of buzzword that I formerly sort of plagued myself with. I was like, oh, that's just a false belief. It's much easier to discard and move past.
So here's the interesting thing. Even if it's false, but you're getting something out of it, we'll hold on to it. And that's this like what I want to talk about today. So let's say you've gone through a process where you recognize this is a belief that I hold. It's negatively impacting my ability to succeed. Not succeed, let's say very specifically. It's negatively impacting my ability to achieve an outcome I said that I want, an external one, okay? Now, let's say I've gone through the process and recognizing this belief actually isn't true. So I don't need to, like, quote unquote, worry about it. I can just proceed, go ahead. This is nothing that needs to scare me. However, what if there's also a part of me but I really like what I'm getting out of it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, this is interesting. Like, me just like complaining all the time about why this is hard and all that, even though it's not hard, people will tell me they're there. It's okay. Like, good for you. And I really like that. Ooh, am I willing to let go of it? And that's a lot of times what people don't recognize. We all don't recognize. And this is like an old story that tells that the way we hold ourselves back, we're doing it for a reason a lot of times. We get something out of it. We don't get the external thing, the result, but we get an internal thing, an internal feeling, an internal reward of some sort. Like that person that held themselves back in their business, they felt a lot more comfortable keeping themselves small, even though they didn't get them the external result. But they got something out of it. They got a feeling of stability, a feeling of security, a feeling of like, I'm competent at dealing with the level of this, with the business of this level. This is okay. And I think a lot of times we don't recognize that like we're getting something out of holding on to these. Like the people, again, like it's a stage, like you said. It's like, if you can just recognize, you know what, this is a belief that I hold. It is false. It is not serving me. And you go, amazing. If, however, because this is what I noticed in some people, they kind of regress back or they struggle to let go of it. And that's the question. What are you getting out of holding on to this? And usually people will be like, what the fuck? I'm not getting anything. I know. It's like, no, you are. And if you can have that honest introspection, that's when you can really start to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that making sense?
It does. How much do you think sort of either social conditioning or cultural conditioning plays a role in this? Do people from some parts of the world seem to struggle with these false or limiting beliefs more than others?
Specifically around the beliefs that have to do with that cap people's ability to evolve or grow, it's all the Commonwealth. Like the guys I work with from like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, all that jazz, the whole like tall poppy syndrome thing. Yeah. That's a very common one. Yeah. Where like you logically know you want this thing, you want to grow, but emotionally it's like, you know, people are not going to like that.
Yes.
So by me keeping myself small, at least I get to keep this. The people aren't going to say negative things about me. And also from my perspective on this, it's challenging because it's very passive aggressive, the things people say in those countries. It's not that, I think it's easier if somebody were to tell you like, listen, Alex, like, who do you think you are trying to grow? It's like, F you. You'd be like, you know what? I don't need that in my life. F you. And you just like walk out of it and it'd be easier for you. But it's these very little kind of like passive aggressive comments that people make towards each other that it makes people feel very uncomfortable and like bad, but not bad enough to say, I need to bounce out of this environment. This is not okay. And it's that weird kind of in between that keeps people stuck there. Yep. They're like, I don't have to deal with those kind of little comments with the guys at the bar or whatever it may be. You probably know this better than I do, though.
I think that if the social conditioning, so yeah, in Commonwealth countries, I think there is a bit more of that sort of tall poppy syndrome, downplay your capabilities or attributes. And where I've tried to understand this more and sort of do a full circle is I believe that works as like a negative set of affirmations. So if you're in a habit of downplaying capabilities, you know, if you're constantly telling yourself you're less than, despite evidence to the contrary, eventually you start to believe it as a truth. And then when you believe it as a truth, it acts in a way where, so obviously the Commonwealth countries versus the American sort of culture of, you know, I can do anything. Like, yes, you can. the way I've tried to understand that better is previously I thought that was noble. I thought there was something, I convinced myself up until very recently that there's something noble about being humble. There's something noble about sort of downplaying yourself. And I think the social conditioning led to that. But
you were getting something out of it.
I was getting something out of it. And so actually I thought it was the most noble thing to do, is to always sort of be humble. And then what I didn't realize is that I was actually protecting myself, because if you start to aim higher, the whole sort of tall poppy syndrome exists, that we build people up to a certain point and then we have to tear them back down. And I think that what happens, especially from people from those cultures, is that we place very constrained, we limit our aspirations, because we've been brought up in a culture that loves to see people go from the peak to the valley. And so maybe it's at a subconscious level. It's like, well, I don't really want to commit to this thing, because if I actually make it, for sure, I'm going to be torn down, and that's going to be really painful. So the easiest way to avoid the pain of going from the penthouse to the gutter, which is inevitably going to happen, because that's what happens, right? We're conditioned that way. The easiest way is just not to actually summit the mountain in the first place.
Yeah.
So it actually becomes, it does this sort of full circle from going from a false belief to actually sort of affecting the way we see reality, and then we actually sort of start to manifest it, because we never actually move beyond our comfort zone for fear of actually having to go back to our comfort zone at some point in time.
So let me ask you this. How do you think that relates to it? Because I see that connection about, like, people are getting something out of it and holding themselves back. They don't get that, like, that belief that I shouldn't do this, or that, like, it's not okay. They're getting something out of it. How do you see that?
I can only speak from my experience that what's helped me is the reason why I think I suffered from this for the longer period of time is because I convinced myself this is a noble thing to do.
So okay, let's talk about that word noble.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you talked about the previous podcast, like you optimize for an external goal, you figure out the target. Noble, what's that trying to optimize for? Nobility.
Yeah.
I'm leaving that as a question for you. What is nobility optimizing for?
My own subjective internal assessment of myself. I'm the hero of my own movie.
Do you think that's plausible? Do you think it's plausible that was very heavily influenced by the environment around you?
Sure.
This is what noble people do. They keep themselves small. They don't whatever.
100%.
Yeah, and like that's how that bleeds into that social acceptance, and like that's what we get out of it. It's like there was a part in your younger self that said, you know what? If I keep myself small, or even if I see a lot of success, I like don't enjoy it, or I think I'm not, whatever it may be, then by default, people will really like me. So therefore, even though this belief I have of like how I look at nobility, about how much I should succeed, aim for, whatever it may be, logically doesn't get me towards my external target, I get something out of holding on to this belief. Out of this suffering, there's a reward for it, and that reward is social acceptance. Does that?
Yeah. So the way I've tried to recalibrate that with myself, because you've probably ingrained this way of thinking for so long. It's not as if you sort of have a realization once, great, I'm healed. It's going to be something which you default to, and now I'm better at catching myself when I default to those limitations. And I've shifted it and said, rather than saying I'm doing the noble, honourable thing to do, which was false and was what held me back, is saying, oh, I'm being a pussy. I don't want to set a higher aspiration for myself and subject myself to the risk of failure or the risk of ridicule or anything else. So when I can shift that, for me personally, that's what works. I typically do well when I'm sort of in a reactive.
Yeah.
So when I've been able to shift that and say, okay, I'm actually being a pussy here, it's not noble at all, then I can move beyond that limitation very quickly.
Can I offer, I think, what would be a more effective way for you to think about this? So how you're saying I am being a pussy, that's like my entirety, I'm being a pussy. However, if you were to say there's a part of me that's trying to hold this back, or there's a part of me that's getting something out of this. What is that part? What is it getting out of this? Okay, because this is not what I want. Like there's two parts of me that we always talk about. There's that higher level you, the more evolved part, and then there's the emotional you. So you can say, okay, that lower part of me is getting something out of this. What's going on here? Is this valid or not? You say like, okay, like this lower part of me is just being scared, it's being a pussy, whatever you want to call it. Recognize like, what is it getting out of it? And so, this is not relevant. And I think what I've experienced for myself, it's easier for me to function and take action when I don't think about myself as an absolute like Idemar is. But the more I recognize there's different parts of me that have different wants, and I get to choose who I'm going to put in the driver's seat, it's easier to be effective and just do the right thing. Because even if I'm telling myself, let's say I talk to myself, and this could be just me, but like yourself, and I was like, Idemar, you're just being a pussy. What will probably happen is I'll try to counterbalance that with like over-aggression. And that'll still be, an emotional reaction. And I won't be calm and logical in doing the thing. But if I can say to myself, let's just split this. There's a part of me that's just being fearful here. Okay, what would the more evolved part of me do? What would they do? So, okay, you would just tell this part, okay, I get that you're feeling this way. Good for you. Go sit in the back. You just do what you're supposed to be doing. And for me, that's helped me be much more effective. And I'll just go through like an up and down, like I'm being a pussy. No, now I got to go. And I used to do that a lot. And I still probably default to that at times. But instead of just saying I am, saying there's a part of me that has been an incredible tool for me just to make it so much easier to be effective. Have you played with that yet?
I have. It's very difficult to fully escape it, like the death clutch of that lower level thinking, because I think it's coloured so much of either my life, and I'm sure other people suffer from it in their own ways, that it's just reps of thinking, like, how do I create new neural pathways? And the way I just always try to bring it back down to an analogy that I can understand. The one that I use, probably 10 people listening to this podcast to hear is the 100-meter sprint analogy. If you and I are on the starting blocks and there's 10 other runners and we know the distance, it's 100 meters, and there's a time, we can understand the basic physics here. Now, if you come first place and you run 11 seconds and I'm dead last 20 seconds, if I'm sitting here going, I'm a great runner, that flies completely in the face of the evidence that was just presented. So it's unlikely that I'm going to have an inflated sense of my capabilities. But more to the point of this topic, if you won, you're like, I'm not very fast. I'm like, you're the fastest runner here. Like, you crossed the finish line. I don't know how well you'll be able to hang on to that belief, because there's just overwhelming amounts of evidence in front of you. So I couldn't imagine that someone who runs 100 meters and wins might be saying, I'm not as fast as state level and national level, Olympic level, but by the people who were here and ran this race, you came first. So what I try to do is, how do I understand whatever the topic is in the same way that I can understand time and distance? And if I can break it down to those parts, then I can get better at actually self-assessing capabilities. So, my a business trauma that happened probably about 5 or 6 years ago, a long convoluted story, like betrayal and fraud and corruption of a business partner. It was long, messy, and a lot of public ridicule, and a very, very messy situation. And I think it really plagued my perception of myself for a long period of time, because it was just this chronic triage of financial and legal and all kinds of stuff for a long, long period of time. So I could deal with it for a short period of time, but when it's every day for years, it just becomes exhausting. And then I found myself very low, just very low confidence in my capabilities overall. And I've tried to build the table legs of the belief that I'm, capable of doing stuff by seeking evidence, and people, confiding in people and having people play devil's advocate to your thinking has really helped. So the tabletop analogy, am I good in business? And so for me, the table legs that support that belief is, did I move to the part of the world where I didn't know anybody and be more successful than anyone in that thing? Yes. Did I have all the right attributes to sort of like have an easy sort of win there? No. I could sort of keep going, but I could build these evidence and say, okay, it turns out I am pretty good at that thing. So the more I've been able to actually provide evidence to the belief, the more I'm able to actually understand it, and I believe at a internal level, move beyond it and say, no, actually, I did come first in that 100-meter race.
Can I challenge you here?
Yeah.
So I think this is exactly what we're talking about today. So logically, you know that it's not true that I'm bad at business.
Sure.
Logically, you know that you're very like talented, you're very skilled, whatever you want to call it. However, there's probably a part in you that says like, by me not, like let's inverse it, by me not going big and really big right now, I can be chill. I mean, I can not have all those legal issues. I cannot have this. Like I can have a sense of stability, a sense of safety. And that's the biggest thing. You're getting something out of holding on to this, man. And like, this is something, you know, we've talked about as friends for a long time, but like, I see you as someone who's so much better than what he's currently doing. So there's a part of you that actually says like, there's something good here in this space. We want to stay in this place. And that's the thing. It's like, it's not that you know this space is just bad for you and okay, like, let's go. There's a part in you, and again, it's not you entirely, there's a part in you that's getting something out of staying here. And by you recognizing, oh, there is a part in me here, what is it? That's when you can say, okay, once I understand what it is, am I willing to let go of it? Because when we don't do that, then we keep getting dragged into it. Our subconscious keeps pulling us here. There's some kind of rewards from you staying here, whether it's a sense of stability, like, man, I got a good life right now, like things are relatively like good, they're stable, like we have 3 dogs, we have like, you know, we're perhaps having like expanding a family, whatever it may be. And you know what? This would actually be really nice if it just stays stable like this. And there's a part of us that gets a reward from doing things that we know logically we don't want to do. It's a yin and the yang. It's like viewing it in that absolute form of this is just a bad thing. It's like if it was just that, you would let go of it. It would be easy. But the reason we don't let go of these things because there is a positive in it that we sometimes don't recognize. That's why we're holding on to it. Like a common example is you know, when people need to change social circles because, you know, like I want to expand, I want to go with like higher level people, higher level entrepreneurs, whatever it may be. And they don't accept, let's call it like the lull, that while I transition to this new group, I'm going to have to leave the old group because there's going to be a bit of a lull. So they recognize this old group is, let's call it quote unquote negative for what they want out of life, but at least they don't feel lonely. So I'm getting something positive out of here. And because they don't recognize that, like, this is something that I actually do want and not feel lonely, they can't decide if they're willing to accept that lack of it or not. Like when we grow, are we willing to accept like the positive things that we got from that old stage that we're gonna have to let go of, with a sense of stability, a sense of safety, a sense of competency. Like for Mira and I, we're growing the business and we're doing a lot of new things. I feel less competent every day at work than I did probably 6 months ago. I feel awkward a lot of times. Like, but am I willing to give up that sense of competency that like I feel good about myself because like yay me?
Yeah.
Or not? And I think that's the thing. Like, we get something out of holding on to the things that keep us small. We get something out of them. And unless we know that, it's probably going to keep that hold over us.
So, you know, do you want to be the champion swimming in the kiddies pool? Like, do you want to be competing at the lowest level and feel like you're winning, or are you willing to actually step into bigger and bigger arenas and go from being, you know, peak performance to the new guy again? Because I feel like that's a threshold that a lot of people dip their toes into. It feels bad. So they regress back to, well, I'm just going to stay put here. I'm going to own this domain, whether it's in business or relationships, like the stats on, you know, battered women who sort of go back to the abusive, you know, partner, because the idea of being single.
It's a sense of familiarity.
Yeah.
They hold on to it. And it's like, it's again, what do you want more? Like your future success or what you're currently holding on to? And the thing is, most people, I as well, I didn't recognize that a lot of times we hold on to things. They don't serve us. They don't really serve us. They're nice. And that's why they can be very alluring if we don't recognize it. But the moment we can recognize, you know what, this is like the upside of this overall negative thing. And because of that, I keep holding on to it because I like this upside. I haven't been willing to give it up yet. I haven't been willing to be a bit lonely, like when I'm either single or when I'm moving to a new peer group or whatever it may be. I haven't been willing to give up that feeling of like, oh, I'm really smart. Like, I'm a really great coach. I can coach a lot of people. I can do that very well. I'm willing to give that up to say, like, let's grow the business to the whole next level and like feel a bit incompetent as a CEO as I grow this because there's a lot of learning curves here. Like, am I willing to give up that? Because I know, like, I don't want to keep the business at this level. I want to grow, but am I willing to give that up? The rewards I get from keeping it small, like feeling really good about myself or whatever it may be. So I think it's a big part of it. Like, just because something's negative doesn't mean it's 100%. It's not black and white. You get something out of holding on to the beliefs that hold you back. And if you don't recognize what that is, you can't get to a place where you can just say, okay, you know what? I'm willing to give this up. If you're not willing to give this up, you're probably going to hold on to it. Even if you can make that little step forward, you'll end up taking a step back at some point.
Do you have a simple process for yourself personally that if you are aware that you might be in a place where you're holding yourself back, do you have either a series of prompts, some kind of a formula or a model that you work through to help recognize that?
So I'll put it this way. I think the thing that oftentimes holds us back is, especially from graduating, it's a tribal thing. Sorry. A lot of times I recognize I'm afraid to go to the next level or do the next thing because of how that might affect my relationship with the people that I really care about, which are not super common. Like it's not. I don't like me. I'm pretty insular. I have my little small tribe, and for me, just to recognize, okay, I'm afraid that if I was going to the next level, I'm gonna have to leave down. Like we're gonna let go of a lot of stability. There's gonna be a little bit more chaos. There's gonna be a little bit more uncertainty. And saying, I'm afraid this is how it's going to influence our relationship or damage possibly our relationship. And I want to know if you feel the same way or if this is something you're open to supporting me through. Like I have that talk with my wife. And for me, I felt there's nothing more relieving of all that pressure and like just makes it so much easier to let go of that stuff when the people who I actually care about, are in line with me wanting to grow. And I've seen this is especially in the Asian culture. So I coach quite a few guys from Singapore, Hong Kong. And I actually also from Europe as well as having with a couple of the guys. But when I tell them, can you please go have that conversation that you need to have with your father? And you just want to hear that like what you're doing is okay because you didn't go to school, you didn't go this, but you have a massively successful business because he's never actually told you that he's proud of you. And it's wild because they have that conversation. Their father's always like, I didn't know you wanted to hear that, but like, dude, it's amazing what you've done. You've built this big company or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, he's just like, whoo, they shoot for the moon. Because all that emotional weight of like this thing that was holding me back, but I was getting out of it a sense like, I don't want him not to love me or not approve of me. They were getting out of it. They were able to let go of it. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's been the biggest thing is recognizing that usually with this stuff, there's a sense of approval that is stopping me, that's for me like holding me back, that I get to keep things how they are, so I know I'm going to keep the certain like level of approval I have or love or whatever it may be. And maybe there's another way for me to get that. Maybe it's actually not something I need to fear letting go of. I can still have it at the next level, and let me go verify that. And if I can verify that, it's very uncomfortable a lot of times to have that conversation, and it feels very vulnerable to say like, hey, if I do these things and I might have more like days where I'm a bit frustrated or a bit this or a bit that. Will you still support me in this? And to ask that, it feels very uncomfortable. But when you get the answer of like, of course, and I want you to do this and I want you to grow, then it's like, all right, let's go. Mm-hmm. For me, that's been then also what I've seen with most of the guys when they have these conversations, especially with their fathers or their loved ones or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer it?
It does. I think that there's a lot of media where someone takes a big risk and it works out. So I think that a lot of people have this kind of idea that sometimes, taking that leap and, knocking on the door of novelty and, the universe provides. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it is worst case scenario. So sometimes you take that big leap and it's not a, success story that will be written about for eons. It's like it was a disaster. But then that starts to then condition the person that, okay, well, I took the leap. It ended really badly, so I will never, ever take that leap again. Yeah. And what I've tried to do is try to ask myself, they're painful because they're really obvious once you ask the contrarian question. Such as, let's say someone has a limiting or false belief around their business. I want to do X, but I don't want to do that, or this is the complexity. And you just go, yeah, but what if you didn't have to? What if you didn't have to have that complexity? Yeah. So if someone said, yeah, I want to launch this thing, but I don't want to be working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. And you're like, okay, what if you just did the thing without working 16 hours a day? Like, how would that be possible? Like, ugh, I have to rethink this. But it's something which I pick up from Naval Ravikant because he's got a very contrarian way of looking at business. Yeah. And he's like, the metaphor of business is you really get paid crossing the finishing line. The finishing line could be, I've got a relatively, in terms of entrepreneurship, owning the thing, not buying yourself the job.
Yep.
Either it's spitting out cash and I don't have to do anything, or I exit and sell and sort of walk off into the sunset. So if that's a metaphor finish line, you could get there in the most complex Spartan race way and sort of drag yourself with 2 broken legs across the finishing line with missing teeth. Or you could just like hop on a Segway and just kind of like zoom across and sort of like do it really comfortably. The reward is the same. The pain you feel to get there is optional. And one constraint that I definitely have been challenging with recently is the operational requirements. I think because I've had a series of events over my business career where I've spent longer periods than I'd like to admit trapped in a business. And so my concern is if I launch a thing, then I'm going to be trapped. I'm going to have all these obligations. There's going to be sort of pain, suffering, misery, and I don't want to have to have all those obligations because right now I've managed to reduce a lot of my obligations down. But that's a false belief. And so I have to sort of ask myself the contrarian questions like, well, if I want to do the thing, how could I do the thing and just not have those obligations? Which forces you to get more creative.
Can I take it to the next level?
Yeah.
What if you also asked, like, is it possible to have a lot of obligations but not feel trapped?
Sure.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's the bigger thing for you, that you equate commitment to like an obligation to being trapped, to being negative and all that kind of jazz.
Sure.
And it's like, because again, like that's the pattern that your brain recognized in the past. I committed to these things, I went all in, then I was trapped in it, and it was really, really bad.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be the case. And I think, but again, like having that belief in your head that your brain basically said to itself, you know what? If we just recognize that we shouldn't commit to something because that's going to be really bad, we get to keep ourselves safe. We don't need to go through that suffering. And by you just like keeping yourself out of that, like scaling or committing or whatever it may be, that's what you get out of it. You keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the big thing. Like we get something out of this. And like if we know, okay, like for example, like if you recognize this is what actually, like it tricks me into thinking I keep myself safe, but it causes all this internal frustration because I do want to do bigger things.
Mm.
So then you can say to yourself, okay, am I willing to give up this feeling that I thought I learned about what keeps me safe or not? And am I willing to feel like this might not be comfortable? And like, I don't really know, because for the past 5 years, I've basically told myself a story of like, this keeps me safe. So if I do this, I'll get something positive out of it. And even if I don't like how small it is or whatever it may be, can you give that up? Because if you're saying I want to give that up, then all of a sudden releases a lot of it.
And I think anytime I've been able to move beyond that, you can look back and I'll say a politically correct word so we don't get cancelled here. You feel dumb. I think that's a safe word. Is dumb a safe word?
I don't know.
Okay, you feel less intellectually capable when you can look back at the way you used to view things. And so I had a big aversion to financial wealth for the longest period of time. I was willing to scrap and take risk and do all the hard work. But when it came time to get paid, and we've discussed this before, until I had someone challenge me in just a really simple way of like, well, how are you helping the world by keeping yourself poor? I was like, so in business, I think a lot of people limit themselves by saying, look, I want to launch this business, but I don't want to make a lot of money. It's not all about making money. You go, cool. Why? You're like, oh, because I want to deliver great value to people.
Can I shortcut that?
Yeah.
I would just look at them and say, like, what are you getting out of saying that?
Yes.
Like, no bullshit. Like, if I look you in the eye and you're telling me that, like, bullshit. Money is helpful. What are you getting out of saying that? Yeah. What are you getting out of telling yourself this story that I don't actually want to make a lot of money? Whether that's you keeping yourself safe because you're saying, there's no way I'm going to fail because I'm actually trying to go for something. Or, like, you know what? I just don't want people to judge me. Like, you're getting something out of this. By you keeping yourself small, you are getting something out of this. And it's like, it's a question that I do like to ask people a lot of times. It's like, I'm saying, like, what are you getting out of saying that? Just like, okay, because I think I smell bullshit. But
of course.
Yeah, but instead of saying I smell bullshit, that gets them very defensive. You say, like, what are you getting out of holding on to this? Why do you say that? What's the positive in this? Like, why do you want that? Because imagine, like, if, for example, you said, like, I don't want to make a lot of money back then when you were saying, like, you just, like, worked really hard. Like, what are you getting out of this, Alex? Out of you, like, not making a lot of money?
I recognize that, and I think it would be very powerful. Maybe where I'm trying to angle. Maybe there's a third way here. Calling bullshit on someone is highly likely to make them defensive and not listen to what you want to say. Probably not the move. The second option, which you're suggesting, is ask them what they're getting out of it. But that might be unless they're in presence of someone who is at a very high level, coaching them, help guide them. They might not have the right prompts and frameworks to think that through, to sort of move beyond it. And so I was trying to just be very, very pragmatic and say, okay, you don't want to make much money. Why? Without asking necessarily about the emotion, because I feel like the emotions where maybe that's like a big void that they can sort of get lost in. I said, well, because if I charge a lot of money, people won't be able to engage in my service. And go, okay, so you want to make it free.
Can I challenge you here? I think that asking people why, it gives them a lot of room to BS themselves. But like this is where you kind of put someone into hopefully non-aggressive intellectual corner and say like, what do you think you're getting out of that, dude? Like there's a part of you, and I can immediately say it's not you entirely. Let's protect your ego. It's not you. But there's a part of you that's probably like getting something out of holding on to that. Because you just told me 5 minutes ago, you actually do want to make a lot of money because you want to buy the house, you want to like be able to support your family, whatever it may be. And now you're saying that, but you don't really care about how much money this business makes. So lack of congruency here. So there's probably a part of you that's getting something out of saying that. What are you getting? What do you think that part of you is getting out of it? And all of a sudden, by me extrapolating, I'm not saying you are the problem, but there's a part of you. Let's me and you together work against that part. So like me and your conscious mind, let's work against your subconscious mind together. What is your subconscious mind getting out of it? And that, it doesn't give a lot of room for nonsense. You know what I mean? It might create a little bit of confusion, a little bit of head scratching, a little pause, a silence, but it doesn't give a lot of room for nonsense. So for example, if I would ask like the audience here, is like, what's the one belief that you think is challenging for you to let go of? That you know is holding you back and it's challenging for you to let go of? What are you getting out of it? Is there a part of you that's getting something out of holding on to it? A sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense of stability, whatever it may be. And if you can figure out what that is, then you can ask yourself, am I willing to let go of it? Because if you are willing to let go of it, that's when you can move past it. If you're not, then you're going to stay there. And that's fine. That's everyone's decision. But to recognize that these beliefs are not just 100% negative or 100% positive. Like you're getting something positive out of it, so to speak, even though you think it's a negative one. So like, what is that? And are you willing to give that up in order to get to the whole next level?
So how would you help coach someone whose response is, I don't know?
I don't know what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah.
Let's walk through an example. This would be hard on a conceptual level, but if it was an example, trying to think of a recent example of how with a client about this. Could we do you?
Sure.
Okay. So let's say, what are you getting out of holding on to the fact that like you don't want to build the next level of the business like we spoke about earlier? What do you think there's a party that's getting out of it?
Safety, comfort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Is that safety or comfort more important for you in the long term than the feeling of like letting go of the frustration that you're holding yourself back?
Sorry, can you ask again? Is it more important?
So here's the deal. Like it gives you a sense of safety and comfort. With that, I know you also feel very frustrated because you know you're better than what you're currently doing. Like you know you're an elite performer as far as entrepreneurship, and now you're playing like a good game, but not an elite game. And that gap creates a frustration inside you. So like, which feeling do you prefer to hold? That safety or that frustration?
Well, which feeling do I prefer? The safety or the frustration? What do you think I hold on to?
I think you hold on to the safety and it causes you to be frustrated. Like you're not actually holding on to like consciously the frustration. But the fact is like if you're willing to let go of the safety, it'll feel like a bumpy ride. To be like, oh crap, like we're doing this again. Oh my God, I have all this association that if I do that, that's going to happen. If I do this, that's going to happen. This feels scary.
Sure.
But you'll like the person that you look at in the mirror every day so much more.
Yeah.
You'll be so much more at peace with them.
Yeah.
I think the reason that you sometimes aren't as, let's say, calm or as methodical as you can be is because there's an internal agitation. That you know that you're better than what you're currently doing. However, that part of you that wants to keep you safe is saying, but this keeps us safe.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to hold on to it. And recognizing like this is something I have to let go of, and it's going to feel very scary. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. That's the real key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Accurate.
Yeah. Cool. Hopefully that didn't go a little too deep.
No. I've just, because I think a lot of people would have a hard time when they get to that point. You know, if I've got, you know, average level intelligence and a desire to improve, and I'm working with, you know, an expert in the field like you, this is obviously still something that like the reps of and the amount of times which you need to sort of prompt me and challenge me. So without that level of domain expert and feedback loop, I don't know how well the average person would just be able to recognize what do I get out of this, be able to identify that and be able to move on to it.
I'm not sure. Truthfully, I think people are they're more capable than they give themselves credit for in this domain, because it's just a domain they haven't spent much time in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like rarely, I think if somebody spent 10 minutes after this podcast, just instead of going on to the next thing, driving to the next place, whatever it may be, but ask themselves like, what's the one thing that I think that I know really blocks my success? A way that I think, a belief, whatever you want to call it. You're like, okay, this is something that I know, I'm aware of already, that I've wanted to shed. What's the upside? If somebody like, not me, because that's a difficult thing, but what if somebody like me held onto this kind of belief? What upside would they get from it? What feeling would they get from it? Not an external thing, because we know externally it's holding them back, but internally, what does it give them? What's the reward they get from it? And usually it's going to be safety, stability, security, something that's like not dramatically positive, but it caps the negative, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people can figure that out. And then the next step is once they figure that out, they got to decide, am I willing to accept the in-between? Because, for example, with you, while you give up the safety and the stability, and before you see the external result, there's going to be a lull there.
Sure.
Where you haven't yet experienced like the high of the new success, and you're just like without that sense of stability. And that feels really uncomfortable. It's like going between the old social circle and the new one. There's a lull.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're willing to also accept that lull preemptively, that's when they can win. And I think that's the biggest common mistake. Even after people have figured this out, if they're not willing to accept that lull, you're not going to proceed.
Would this be one of those areas where proximity to people that are achieving more in the area that you want to be achieving in would be highly beneficial to people, where they can gain a perspective of seeing how other people think through, you know, similar belief patterns and move beyond it? Because I think as a sort of social creature, the ability to sort of witness that through somebody else and say, oh, okay, this person was doing X, but actually they needed to do Y, or they believed this, and the truth was actually that. That then they can start to turn that internally and start to go, okay, where's my blind spots? Where am I holding myself back? And if they can do it, so can I.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just exposes us to different ways of thinking, different possibilities, because a lot of times, like I said, like we're not aware that this is our bias. We just think this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to say, this person doesn't operate that way, maybe this is not just the way this is. Maybe this is the way I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just thinking about this and this doesn't actually serve me, then why am I doing it? Maybe I'm getting something out of it. Maybe I need to let that go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, am I willing to let that go? And am I willing to face kind of uncertainty between when I let that go and when I actually see the success, the external one that I want?
Yes.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Cool. Any last questions about this one? Because it was a bit of an amorphous one.
Yeah.
All right, so this one I want to leave the audience with. So if you're feeling that there's something that's holding you back and you know it's holding you back, you're aware of this and you're aware of, man, this is not true. This is nonsense. Why do I keep letting this thing hold me back? Then ask yourself, what could I possibly be getting out of it? Is there some kind of negative blocker where it's capping my downside? It makes me feel a bit more safe just to stay this way. It makes me feel a bit more secure, a bit more stable, a bit more like people will approve of this because this is okay right now. What am I getting out of keeping myself small? Because more often than not, there's something there. It might be hidden, but there's something alluring that's keeping you small. And you hold these kind of beliefs, so you got to ask yourself, what are you getting out of keeping yourself small? And just by answering that, you can all of a sudden let a lot of it release. Because once you bring it from the darkness into the light, like Godzilla isn't as scary once you see him. And it's just that sometimes. So I hope today's podcast was helpful. And obviously, like Alex said, if you want to get help and have me actually see what's going on, you're welcome to the Apply to the Arena. And aside from that, I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks, mate.